yes, you might be in a worse situation than someone else. Cool. But if you're both going for the same thing, it doesn't matter where you're coming from. It doesn't matter that person's 5 steps ahead of you. Success / your goals don't care. So just get it done. Some people are smart, some people are stronger, some people are weaker, some people are more resilient, some people are more positive, some people, there's just different things which are just in us, which make us all need each other. And this is why I also believe in community, because I just don't believe that we do anything by ourselves. We have strengths and weaknesses, and in our weaknesses, we go and find people to help us. Let me not ramble on. Let me give you 3 things that separated what I was doing. One.
Quick one. If you'd like to support us on our journey to 1,000, please do consider subscribing or following this podcast, wherever it is you're listening to this. Thank you. Yo, everybody, and welcome to 1,000 Voices, the podcast on the mission to interview 1,000 inspirational Black Britons. And today's guest is definitely a very, very inspirational Black Briton. Mark Maciver, who's the founder of the most iconic barbering brand in my eyes in the UK, SliderCuts. In this interview, Mark, in a very down-to-earth manner, speaks about the brand, how he was able to grow the brand, the struggles that he's gone through, and above all, how he believes that this brand has been so successful in such a congested industry. Whether you're a barber or entrepreneur or professional or in whichever field you're in, I believe that what Mark talks about in this interview can be transferred to whichever field you're in. So, without further ado, let me not ramble on. This is 1,000 Voices, and here we have Mark Maciver. Welcome to 1,000 Voices. Thank you very, very much, Mark, for coming to the podcast. How are you doing this morning?
I'm good. Thank you for having me on your show.
Yes, it's all good. It's all good. For people watching, what you probably don't know is that it's 6 a.m. right now. Are you always up this early?
Yes, I am. Even if I was at home, I would still be up by now. I don't know if they get past this time.
Right, okay, cool. Well, that's all good then. Yeah, man. Thanks again for coming to the podcast. Very much appreciated. What I like to do, where we like to start, is with a bit of background, like to understand where you've come from. So, just to begin with, can you tell us about your, where your area you grew up in, what your upbringing was like?
Okay, so I've grown up in different areas. From when I was 10 years old, I grew up in Camden, like Gospel Oak, which is in Camden. But before that, I moved around a lot. Like I lived in Elscourt, I lived in Neasden, I lived in Kingsbury, I lived in Kilburn. There might be somewhere else which I'm forgetting, but I moved around a lot, loads of different primary schools. But then the main bulk of where it became really steady was when I was 10 years old and I moved to Gospel Oak, which is in Camden. And then I stayed there till I was 26 when I got married. And then I moved in with my wife, which was in Dalston, which is about 10 years ago now.
Cool, right. And what was the area like? Or the areas, you grew up in a few different areas. What were they like that you're growing up in?
Well, I guess Camden is what I remember most because that's, the main part when I was 10 years old. Before that, it was, I was a child, so you weren't going out by yourself. There was no point I was going out by myself, so you just kind of remember what the streets were like and what, kind of what the environment was like, but you never really experienced those areas as like a teenager who was thinking for himself. So, but Camden, it was different. There were different elements of Camden. Like, there was the racist element when I was younger. There was the racist element where, there were kind of like little groups of racist boys, who would just, I don't know, just going around wanting to, I don't know, fight black kids.
Wow.
you had that, you had that element, it was still, it's kind of a nice area, like, big park, loads of things, youth clubs, loads of things like that going on there as well. So, there were just different elements of Camden, it wasn't like a horrible experience at all. I enjoyed my childhood. And as I said before that, when I was living in Kilburn, Neasden and all those different places, it was, I guess I can't tell you what the area was like. I can just tell you what the schools were like, more so, because those are the schools I went to. Some of the schools I really enjoyed. I know there was one particular school I didn't enjoy. One school I hated, actually, to be honest. But that's because my brother were the only two black children in the school.
Wow.
And it was just kind of like, it was obviously you stand out, one, and two, it was racist. But it's weird because we were about 6, maybe 7. I was like 6 or 7 years old. So the kids didn't even fully know probably what they were doing, what they were saying. And I guess they were just, when I get older, I'm like, oh, well, realistically, they're just hearing it from their parents then. Because, and some of the things they're just saying, they thought that my skin was just dirty skin. And, you could scrape off the brown.
That's nuts, son.
Things like that, and just kind of like, kids didn't want to play with me because I was a black kid and didn't want to be around me. I remember going on a trip in school and it was like, right, this kid had to sit next to me because everyone has to sit next to someone on the bus, and he's just angry just because he had to sit next to the black kid. So so I can tell you like the school experiences, because those were more also my experiences of some of the areas which I lived in. But as I said, when I got older, that's when I really experienced for myself, like, and I was in Camden.
Yeah, that's interesting. You speak about your experience like that, because most people I come across, I mean, people, almost every black person I come across has experienced some form of racism, but it's usually more subtle. It's like microaggressions or something like that. But you've had like very overtly open racist experiences, quite a few. It sounds like growing up. Do you feel like that?
Yeah, but I'm 37 now, so in the 90s, in the 90s when I was a kid, it wasn't like what it was now. Like it wasn't really an offense for a kid to be racist towards you. It wasn't like they said it was okay, but it wasn't like looked at. Anybody who knows who was kind of like living in the 90s knows that it wasn't a big deal to people.
Okay, all right, I hear you. And in your book, yeah, we're going to talk more about your book in a bit. But in your book, you talk about your mum being an entrepreneur growing up. So she had a few businesses like what was it, catering and news agents and a few other things that she was doing. Do you feel like her influence growing up has shaped the kind of entrepreneurial character you are now?
Yeah, definitely. I think that had a part to play with it. My mum was always hustling. I can't say that she ever fully established herself in a fully successful business, but growing up, seeing that affects you subconsciously. That feeds you. So my mum was like, catering. She was, making plantain chips and chin chin and selling them to shops. She was selling, jewelry probably at one stage. I don't know if people remember Avon. Doing Avon. She was just like hustling. She was being a carer. She was just like working every job she could work, and a lot of these jobs were self-employment jobs. She owned a shop when I was a kid, a news agent, where she sold, sweets, chocolates. She sold, I think she sold other things as well. She sold like, I think she used to even sell meat and stuff like that, stockfish and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So she was always hustling. So I think that subconsciously played a big part in my mentality.
Right. And them times there, when you're younger, growing up, living, with your mum and your siblings, do you remember what your early career ambitions were?
I think the earliest memory I have of wanting to do something was when I was about 7, and my mum had said to me that my granddad owned a rubber factory in Nigeria. And I was like, oh yeah, he makes rubber. He owns a factory where he makes rubber, and he sells the rubber to whoever. Which I later on found that he used to even export rubber to even England, I think, where people used to buy it. So I remember just hearing that, and I was like, wow, like he owns a factory that makes him money. She said that to me maybe, I don't know, when I was 5, when I was 6, I can't remember. She said that. But I remember when I was 7 years old, we were having a conversation in our living room, me and my 3 brothers and my mum, and we saw it was Arnold Schwarzenegger on TV, and I don't know, we saw something where they said he got paid, I can't remember, millions or something along these lines, right, for some film he had done, and we just all started talking about the money he made, and we're like, wow, what would you do if you had this money? What would you do? And everyone was talking. So I can't remember who brought up the conversation, but someone said, what would you do if you had £40,000? And we're kids, obviously. Not that £40,000 isn't a lot of money now, but especially in the 90s, there was a lot more then. And as a kid as well, it's a lot more. As you get older, you realize that £40,000, could go on your deposit for your house now, or whatever. It's still a lot of money now. But we were just talking, and we were like, what would you do with £40,000? And my brothers were all talking about, different things to buy: trainers, computer consoles, all these other things, right? They were just talking. And I remember I said, oh, I would buy a factory. to make stuff to sell, basically to make money. And they all laughed at me because what I was saying, and I just remember they just laughing at me because obviously it's like, which 7-year-old kid talks about buying a factory to make stuff and make what? But it's because I heard my mom say that my granddad owned a factory and he made stuff. So for me, it was like, that makes sense, and I guess subconsciously it's almost like you've used money to now make money and not just spend.
Yeah, yeah, of course, that's perfect. And with with your career, so you started your barbering quite early. I think it was 18 years old, you started your first apprenticeship, and you've been in the industry since then. Um, how did you first of all get into it? Actually, yeah, let's talk about that first. How did you get into barbering first of all?
I got into barbering. Well, the first time I cut hair, I was about 13, 14 years old. Then I, started working in a shop when I was 18. I got into barbering literally because one, I had an interest in hair, which I didn't realize till I got older. But I was always looking at people's haircuts, like on TV. Like I remember when I was a kid and I was probably it was around that same age, around 7 years old. And my older brothers and my next door neighbor, you know, my older brother Thomas Phillip, my next door neighbor Shegan. Shout out Shegan. If, I ain't seen you since we were that age because we moved. If you ever see this, it's me, your old next door neighbor. They went to the barbershop, right? And they were talking about going to the barbershop and what haircut they were going to get, right? And I remember hearing them talk about that. And I remember wanting to go with them, but I couldn't for whatever reason. And they came back and they were talking about the haircut. I can't remember what haircut they got, but they were talking about the haircut, like touching their hair and talking about what hairstyle they got. And I remember just being envious and just feeling like, I want to go get a haircut. And I remember started saying things like, when I get older and I, go to a barbershop, I'm going to get this haircut. I'm going to get that haircut. And I just remember it was a really pivotal moment for me. I just remember thinking I want to go to the barbershop and get a haircut. So that's my interest was always kind of there. Then I'm looking at people on TV and being like, oh, that haircut. I'd love to have that haircut. And then when I was 13, 14 years old, I was still getting haircuts at home. I'd never been to a barbershop still. So I was just like, and shout out Shegan as well, because Shegan's dad actually gave us a haircut one time. And I can't remember what haircut it was, but I just remember my hair feeling neat. And that was my first, I guess, good experience. I've never actually spoken about that probably in any interview. But that was my first good experience of a barber. Because before that, my mum would just cut all my hair off, like bald. And Shegan's dad, my next neighbor, this is when I was living in Kingsbury, gave us a haircut. And I can't remember, I just remember it was just neat. And I remember I could tap my hair and it was like, it was just neat. I was like, wow, this feels good. So then it was like back to my mum's haircut, all off. So one day I got tired of that. I was like, I need a good haircut. So I can't get it from my mum. My older brothers used to give me just one levels as well. So I was like, I'm going to try it myself. So I picked up the clippers and cut my own hair, and it just went wrong. So I had to cut all my hair off. But then I still didn't have no money to go to the barbershop. So the next haircut, I cut my hair again and again and again. And then, I started to get a little bit better. Then cutting my little cousin who was living with me. Then my little brother every now and then. Then slowly people in my area started coming to me. And then, a few years later, suddenly I've got this apprenticeship in a barbershop.
With the apprenticeship, when you got into that initially, did you ever see that becoming like a proper, like legit career for yourself? Or was it just something that you were just doing at the time?
It was something I was doing just because I enjoyed cutting hair. But at that time, that wasn't my career path. Because when I was in college, because I started at 18 and I was still in college at that time, and I was studying performing arts. So I enjoyed dancing, I enjoyed singing, I enjoyed acting, I enjoyed performing, and even outside of that type of career, I did a bit of youth work in my youth club. So I always kind of had this heart for wanting to help people somehow, whether that was youth work, whether that was counseling, therapy, so I always had kind of ideas that maybe I might go into things like being a social worker, which I did a foundation course on anyway, later on, being a therapist or counselor, which I didn't go into, but I did a little bit of that in my foundation of social work. I enjoyed photography. I used to take a lot of pictures, so I thought potentially I might go into photography. So I was doing all of these things around barbering, even when I was cutting hair, like when I was 18, when I was 19, when I was 20, when I was 21, when I was 22. I was studying, I was doing evening courses. I enjoyed training, so I did a personal training course. So I'm a qualified personal trainer from like 12 years ago. So I was doing all these things, while I was still cutting hair. But the key thing which I would say was, in everything I was doing, I never, I never not took barbering serious. So even when it wasn't a thing for me, where it's like, oh, I'm going to be a barber, I still took barbering very seriously. So if you didn't know, you think, yeah, I was working like this is my main career, because I had this thing which I say in my book, which is, whatever you do, do to the best of your ability. Like, it doesn't really matter about what the future outcome is, what the future outcome will be. While you're in it, be in it properly. And I've, even I say it all the time, even in relationships, if you're in a relationship and you're like, kind of like, I don't know where this is going, I don't know if I want to be with her, I don't know if I want to be with him. You're in it at the moment. So, while you're in it, be in it properly. And when you decide to leave, then leave. But I think it's a better mentality to have, because you never know what's going to come from it. You might be feeling like you want to leave and you're not putting your heart into it and you're not putting your all into it. And then suddenly it becomes something that you want to do, but you've neglected it and you haven't taken it seriously enough. So even when I did all these things, I was still in a good position, because when I was like 23, 24, and I decided, actually, I think barbering is my career, I didn't have to change anything about what I was doing. I didn't have to be like, okay, now I'm going to start taking it seriously. Okay, now I'm going to, work hard. Now I'm going to try to be a good barber, because I was doing all of those things anyway.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. And with so when you done your apprenticeship, after that, so what was it like when you first ventured out by yourself and opened your own store, and what challenges did you face when you're trying to open your own store?
Um, the challenge is money. you know, um, I guess the scale I was doing this shop on required a lot of money. And not only that, it was also to do with the state of the shop that I took on. Was like, I'm literally, when I say rat infested, I'm not talking about like as a just as just a statement. It was literally rat infested. Rats. I remember coming to see the place and seeing a rat run past. You know, it was run down like a hole in the roof in the back, so it just almost flooded. The whole thing was molded. The whole thing was like needed. It just needed a lot of money, and then the lease was going for a lot of money. The lease was going for like £60,000. I had to buy the lease for, and then the works ended up being over £100,000 in the shop. Um, so like, and I didn't have any money, so it wasn't like I had money which I had saved up. I had no money, so I had to borrow all of that money. So finding all of that money was difficult, and then also thinking about the deals of how to pay it back. um so that was the difficult thing. Finding a location. So let me go back one step. Finding the right location was the difficult thing, and then after that it was finding the money to fit out and buy this location, which was the perfect location for me. you know um and I talk about that in my book a little bit this in the chapter about the struggle is real, where you talk about all the challenges, finding the money and all the things that were just happening just to to open up the shop, which was difficult. The easy part for me, which was my strength, was marketing the place, getting customers in. That was the part which I wasn't struggling with, which a lot of people, it's almost like it's the reverse of a lot of people's situations. A lot of people maybe have the investors or have the money. And to be fair, I had a lot of people that asked to invest, but I took no investment. So it could have been easier if I would have taken investment, but I just knew that it wasn't worth it, because I had everything else down. I thought, I knew how to run the business. I knew how to market it. I knew how to, I could get the barbers. I could, get the customers. So I thought someone's just going to put money into it, literally just to help me open it. And I just kind of thought money's not enough to take investment. So it's better for me to struggle and to take high interest loans. I sold my house as well at the time for this place as well. So the flat, not house, the flat I sold it during the process to help pay for things. But I just kind of thought that if this goes well, and once I open up the shop, the value of SliderCuts is going to go up. So I just thought, hold out, don't take any investment, because I said as soon as those doors open, that investment of that, let's say that 1% of your business that was worth, I'm just making up a figure, let's say that was worth £1,000 as example, once the shop opens up, that that £1,000, that 1%, £1,000 now goes up to £5,000. So I was just like, pay high interest loans, sell your house, do whatever, just get it open.
And so the thing with barbering, so like so with your business, yeah, like any other business, there's some business places or business industries that you go into where there's is very well established, and there's already a lot of other people in the industry, doing whatever you're doing. And I always hear a lot of people that are put off. I don't want to start this. I don't want to start that because there's already too many people doing it. And you've gone into your industry, barbering. Even there's a lot of barbers, we all know that, but you've managed to carve out your own lane and to become very, very, very established. It's like now SliderCuts is like, when you think of barbers, is one of the first names that comes to your head. What was it? What did you do, or how did you differentiate yourself within that marketplace and grow the way you have grown?
Yeah, let me not ramble on. Let me give you three things that separated what I was doing. One was I marketed myself well on social media. You know, I was on it every day. I put out my work every day. I put out my personality every day. So people knew my values. People knew what I stood for. People, saw my haircuts. They saw the product and the person behind the product. So that was one major thing. Just how I was putting myself out there. Two was that I focused heavily on the product that I was selling, or part of the product, should I say, which was the haircuts. Like I focused on being a good barber, and improving and putting out quality haircuts and giving people quality haircuts. So whether I was on Instagram or not, I was always focused on being a good barber. So the people that came to my chair, were happy with that haircut. So before Instagram, before social media and things like that, I was still a busy barber. I still had good word of mouth. People were still talking about me. I'm not talking about like people in America or whatever it is. I'm talking about, just in the local area, people would come, they want to get a haircut from me. I was busy. I had, queues of like, coming to the shop, it's like 10 people are waiting for me throughout the whole day. Just kind of like my queue hasn't gone lower than 8 people, in waiting, So yeah, the product that, and the third thing I'm going to say is when it comes to the shop, SliderCuts, the shop itself, the barbershop, is I wasn't arrogant to believe that just because I have a name at the time, that I could just open up anywhere and business was going to be great, which a lot of people told me. Loads of people said to me, "Oh, you got a good name. You can open up anywhere. People will come and follow you, right? People come to you." I remember looking at places that people I was like, "This hasn't got any parking outside." They said, "Yeah, but if people will, because they want to cut with you, they'll make it work." And I wasn't arrogant enough to believe that, well, yeah, I'm the man. It doesn't matter. Yeah, I'll go anywhere. You just come and follow me. And I was like, no, I am a servant. I serve people. As soon as you forget that, that's when the start of the fall happens. Because if I start making people try to serve me when I'm offering a service to you, that's where the flop happens. So if I said, it doesn't matter, I'm the man, come and find me. You're lucky and privileged to be getting a haircut with me. So I'll go anyway. They're gonna follow. That's where, you flop. And for me, it's kind of like, no. I said, we need to have parking outside. We need to have good transport links. Thinking about people from north, east, south, west, of how they can make it, how they can get here. Is it easy to get there? It has to be a good space. I was thinking about all these. I was thinking about where is the right location, and then also I said to myself, where is an area that, because I knew that I was serving mainly black people. We cut still white people, Asian people, everyone, but I knew, I'm a specialist in Afro hair. So I said, where is an area that has a lot of black people in it, but doesn't have a barbershop? And I looked for that, so that no matter what happened, even if you lost all your customers, no matter what happened, I just knew. And also, it wasn't about me. It's about, I'm going to be employing barbers. Where's an area that needs a barbershop? So I looked at things like the census. When I came to Shoreditch, I was like, this is surrounded by black areas, even on this street. The flats across the road behind the shop. Hackney Central, Dalston, Islington has a black community. Just all around. And I was like, I looked at this particular location. I said, there isn't a barbershop within a mile radius, black barbershop within a mile radius of here. But there are communities around this area that can walk to this location. So I was like, this is the perfect location, because forget anything social media, all the things there that people were telling me, this area needs a barbershop. So I put a barbershop in here, and then we got loads of people which are just local who just walk in, because it's kind of like they live across the road, or they live 2 minutes down the road, they live behind the shop. they live 5 minutes walk from the shop. So I found the right location, that needed a barbershop. And so when people kind of like they're moving into an industry and they're saying, which people did, people told me as well, you should go to like I was thinking about Dalston at one stage, and people were kind of like, yeah, you can go there. And I was like, but there's loads of barbershops there. They don't need another barbershop. And people said to me, but there's no SliderCuts there. And I remember people saying this to me, not one person, more than one person were like, but all that happened is they'll close down. If you move in there because you got a bigger name, they're the one who's going to close down. And I was like, but why do I want to shut down a business? Because people are kind of like, yeah, what does it matter? But I was like, why do I want to shut down a business? Even if I go in there and I take over, why is that a good thing? Why move into an area that doesn't need you? Someone might say, oh, they need a better barbershop. That's what someone might say, but it's like, but they don't need a barbershop. So I found a location that needed a barbershop instead. And those were the things you could say that separated me to make me kind of like established in this industry, because I was thinking like a business and not thinking like an arrogant guy that thinks he's the man, and thinks that, people, although people might feel that sometimes they need a barber or I feel like people need you, right? I took up, which is a servant mindset of like, how do I serve people and what do people need and where do people need me?
That's really good. It's quite interesting because I was listening to something recently. I can't remember, like a podcast. Can't remember what one it was. But what they were talking about was the value that the money that you make or the value that you receive is in direct correlation to the service that you give. So it's very interesting when you put it like that. It's like you're serving your people, you're giving them a service, and with that you've got to, you know, have pride in your work and do everything like you talk about earlier to the best of your ability. And on that, so you come across as someone that has a very, how do I put it, like a strong mindset. You talk about mindset quite a bit in your book as well, and I've read about some of your difficult times. Like I've read, like I know when you first started, for example, in when you're doing the apprenticeship and you're going to the shop and then like you didn't have no clients and then you're doing other stuff on the side and you're there all day, you're not cutting
Yep.
anybody, in an environment like that, it's easy to just say, you know what, like forget it. I'm gonna go do something else instead. Or like when you're trying to raise to open the shop, it's not small money, you're talking six figures you're needing to get this shop, and then it took a long time. Like what was it I read, like was it like 2 years or something? It took a long time basically to get everything done for the shop. These are not small insignificant things, that they're long and difficult things, and they're just two examples that I know about. How do you find it within yourself, in those times to just keep going?
One of my strengths is that I'm driven. And when I'm kind of like in my head, I logically know I can't do everything. So I'm not one of these people, I can do anything. I can't do everything. I logically know that. But you see, when I'm going for something, I believe I can do it, which is the strength, which means you'll keep going until, the world stops and it literally stops in front of your face and it's like, you can't do it. And that's a strength of mine. So it's kind of like, when I go into a project, I'm looking at everything I can do. I'm like, okay, cool. I got to open up the shop. So I exhaust every resource there is, because I've always had this thing where if I was to fail at something, I don't particularly mind failing if I've done everything I could, because then I know it's out of my hands, and because I believe in God. So I'm like, actually, I can only do what I can do, right? So that's about it. If I've done everything I could do, then what more is there? It's out of my hands. It's coming. I'm almost like, your hands, but you didn't obviously want that to happen. It just wasn't for me. It's just like example right now. I'll give an example. So I'm not a believer, Mister. You can do anything. I think you can do everything to the best of your ability, but you can't do anything. We are all built differently. We all have strengths and we all have weaknesses. So you can't do anything. You can only be the best version of you. But that best version of you might not be better than someone else. So I'm not Mr. kind of like suddenly, make people believe. Right? The reality is this, I'm not going to beat Usain Bolt in a race. Am I upset by that? No. But if I go and race Usain Bolt and I eat right, I train right, and I do everything I can, and I put maximum effort into that race, and I lose, then fair dues. I done everything I could. He was just better. He's just faster than me. I'm not going to be upset by that because there's going to be things which I'm better than him at, like cutting hair. So I think it's a good thing, especially for people just to understand that as well. Because as I said, the strength, just understand you can only do what you can do, and we can't do everything, and we cannot be the best at everything. We don't, and that's where, what you call it, you can cause yourself depression and things like that, where you start putting all this pressure on yourself, making yourself believe that you should be the best at everything and you should be good at everything, which is just not life. Some people are smart, some people are stronger, some people are weaker, some people are more resilient, some people are more positive, some people, there's just different things which are just in us, which make us all need each other. And this is why I also believe in community, because I just don't believe that we do anything by ourselves. We have strengths and weaknesses, and in our weaknesses, we go and find people to help us. That's why I've got a team, because I can't do it all.
Yeah, for sure. And on that, let's talk about the community work that you do as well. So with SliderCuts, you lot are doing quite a few things for the community. You got your apprenticeship programs, your runners, your shadowing courses, to name a few, doing quite a few things for the community. What was the motivation behind starting up all of these different programs and doing that sort of work?
The motivation was when I was a kid, just thinking what I would have liked. And because I grew up in like a poor household, I was always looking for opportunities. So, I was always at like the youth clubs. I was always at like any scheme that was going on in my area or local youth club or whatever it was. So just knowing how I grew up, I was kind of like, I want to be able to help other people, that have grown up in similar situations. And coming to this place now, I'm starting to see a different demographic of people which have grown up with more, and I don't say this in even a negative way, but I've just grown up with more privilege. But to make it clear, I don't say that. Privilege has now become this derogatory word where it's almost like it's a bad thing that you grew up in privilege when it's actually a good thing. So that's why I don't say it derogatory, like in the sense of like you were privileged. If you were privileged, then your parents done something right. God willing, my children will be privileged, because that's the aim, to be privileged, right?
Yeah.
That you set up your children, and they, I hear people nowadays saying things like, oh, they just privileged, and they say it like it's flippant, like as if it's something bad, and it's kind of like, you know, don't sit in your kind of like, let's say, lack of privilege and act like that's the place we're supposed to be, or like it's a better position, or like kind of like it's better, or like it's bad that they grew up in privilege, because ultimately we want our children to grow up that way. So that's why I'm making it clear. I'm not on that side of things where it's kind of like they're privileged. That's what you want. But growing up in a place where I never had that much privilege, I know the struggles of it. So I want to help other people, have a bit of privilege in a sense. I want to help those people which are in those situations like me, or even worse. I'm not saying I grew up in a worse situation. I grew up in a poor household, but then I know people who grew up in places where both their parents were drug addicts. They were both, whether on crack or, heroin or whatever. They didn't get raised. They grew up in a house where they were on the streets from young. So there's people even in worse situations. But I just look at kids and I'm now just like, rah. If there were older people, especially in the community, that were offering there were older people in the community who could have offered things and they didn't realize it. Like the local barbershop could literally just hire a couple kids and keep them off the streets on the weekends and give them a bit of money, which isn't going to affect you massively, but it's going to help that kid a lot. And I would have jumped on something like that. The youth clubs, which I did have, which is something which is one of the saving things in my life. Being able to go to a youth club 3 days a week, in the evenings, and just play table tennis, play pool, play computer, play football, whatever things they had. And every now and then they take you on trips. We're going Chesterton with a youth group and stuff like that. So those things there, knowing how much that helped me, and knowing that if those things weren't there, having no money, having no events to put myself in a sense, what would I have done? I've just been hanging around on the streets, doing nothing. And what they say, the devil makes work for idle hands. So I just know it's very important to occupy people's times, and also at the same time try and put some money in their pocket. So that's where the heart comes from. Just knowing what I've grown up around, how I've grown up, people around me have grown up, seeing kids who come in here, and I've just got a heart for it. And I guess from young I always had that heart as to why I wanted to be a youth worker when I was a kid, as to why I wanted to do counselling or therapy, as to why I wanted to be a social worker. So these were all the things that came from kind of like that, because that's where my heart was.
Yeah. And talking about helping people, your book. So let's. Who did you say you wrote the book for, and how's the reception been since it's been released?
Um, the book was written for young people. It wasn't older people can read it as well. So it's not like if you're older, older than 25, you can't read it. But the way it's written, um, it's written for young people. It was young working class people, but I can't say like a blanket statement like every single working class person, because you can be working class and still have parents who are kind of like who are educated and know what they're doing. So it's almost written like for a certain sect. It was almost like people that are coming to situations like me. So, for example, my situation is my mum moved to this country. My mum in Nigeria is not working class, you know, but she comes to this country and suddenly you drop down a class, right? My mum is well educated, right, but she's not educated in this country. So when she moved to this country and she opened up a shop when she was younger, part of the things that made that shop fail was, one, she never had insurance. But in Nigeria, where she's coming from, you didn't have insurance back then. It's just not something. It's not something they do in that culture. Just kind of like you open up somewhere. Um, it just different ways this country worked, right? So when her storage house got robbed and it took everything, we got put in a situation where suddenly she couldn't afford to pay for things now, and she had no insurance. She couldn't get the money back. All the alcohol, all the crisps, all the chocolates, all the sweets, all the everything she was selling basically got stolen, right? And then you have to kind of, as they say, where do you find the money to buy more stock? If you can't buy more stock, you can't make more money. So you put in a situation. So long and short of it, my mum's shop got shut down. But then, so my mum, as much as she's a hustler, was coming into an environment that she didn't understand. I've been brought up in this environment right now, so I understand this country better than my mum, who's been in the country longer than me, because I was born here, right? She was here before I was born, but I was birthed in this country. So I started realizing that we have parents that can't teach us properly because they moved to this country. It's just like if I move to China right now, as much as I think I'm a business person right now, that all changes when I go to China. The culture is different. The way they do things are different. The policies are all different. So my children who would be born there would understand the country better than me. So growing up in that type of environment, right, and seeing people who are running businesses and they don't know what they're doing. Like, for example, I moved to Dalston about 10 years ago, or just over 10 years ago. And one of the things I noticed was every couple months, an African Caribbean business was shutting down because everyone's talking about gentrification, right? So this is actually where the book actually kind of started. When you could say when the mind's thoughts around it started, all these businesses kept on closing down, and I didn't understand why. And everyone's saying gentrification, gentrification. But I was looking at things that these businesses were doing, and I was like, hold up, you haven't even tried to do this or do that or do this or do that. It's just kind of like you're just shutting down. And people are saying, the rent's going up, the business rates are going up, and I understood all those things there. But I was kind of like, but why have you not tried to maybe up your prices? And people say things like, I guess there's always the same thing, nobody wants to pay more. But then I'm like, but if your business is going to close down anyway, then why don't you just try and up your prices? You might be surprised. And if it doesn't work, you were going to shut down anyway. What does it matter? Or why don't you try some promotions? 2 for 1, buy one, get one free. Why don't you do some flyering in the area? Hold up, you haven't even got a website. How come you haven't got a website? Hold up, you're not on social media. Why are you not on social media? So I'm thinking about all of these things, right, that these businesses could do to stay open. It doesn't mean that they were all going to work, right? But I just felt that people went down without fighting. And people went down also because they didn't understand business. Because a lot of these people were the older generation, right, which come to this country. So now these older generation are teaching the younger generation who are actually born in this country, right? like me, and like some of my peers, right? And they're just teaching them incorrectly. And I was listening to people who I knew, like peers, and telling me things that their parents had told them, and it's just kind of like I'm looking at things that's not correct. So the shaping up culture came because I was like, there are a bunch of things that people are doing wrong, right? There are businesses that are failing that don't need to fail because they're just not educated. They might not be educated in the way that this country runs, right? Little things like insuring your stuff, so that if something like that happens, you're insured. So everything gets stolen, no problem. You paid insurance every month, so now you can get you can get your stock back, right? And just things like that. So shaping up culture was kind of birthed from that, where it was to help people. It was to help people like me, where I'm coming from, it was to help businesses, people with your older generation as well, who, in a sense, no, I'm lying. It wasn't directly to help the old generation. It was to help basically the younger people which were coming up, right, which were being taught wrong. And that's why I call it almost like the five first steps of business, because the five first steps of business in business books are never spoken about. And the reason why they're never spoken about in business books is because the assumption is always made that people know. And this comes from when you're someone who maybe comes from a business background. Like, so as an example, my son now, God willing, my business keeps thriving and keeps working out, right? So my two children now, because of the things they hear me talk about, they will already subconsciously know the first five steps of business, because they've grown up in an environment where they've heard me talking about it all the time. And we're talking about your ethics. We're talking about your honesty in yourself. We're talking about, how you're always in an interview, so, always carry yourself correctly. We're talking about, if you borrow 50p or so on, you make sure you pay that 50p back, because that's your word. And then we're talking about all these things, right? So even before we even talking about credit, and how to do credit, they're learning already about, you borrow 50p of someone, you pay that 50p back. Doesn't matter whether they need it or not, you pay that back. These are the first five steps of business that a lot of people haven't been taught. My children, God willing, will be taught that subconsciously. So what happens is, when they get older, and let's say they decide to write business books, they don't talk about those first five steps, because those first five steps were never directly taught to them. They were taught in an environmental sense, in a sense of it was their environment that taught them. But a lot of us haven't been brought up in that environment, so we never learned those steps. So when we're going to start businesses and stuff like that, we've already missed the five first steps. It's almost like, like, we're already failing because we're behind. So Shaping Up Culture was written because I was just like, there was just so much stuff which we're missing. As I said, look at these businesses suddenly, and it's like we're shutting down. And it's kind of like the logical thing is, okay, well, why don't you try and maybe do some promotions? And then why have they not thought about that? Because they haven't been taught that. So that's kind of like where Shaping Up Culture came. I had a heart for it. I was just like, I wish some of these businesses would have spoke to me. I wish they would have, I wish I could have spoken to them. I wish I could have told them little things where they're going wrong. Because I was looking at little things like some of these businesses I'm talking about, they closed down, right? And their rent went up. Yep, all these things went up. But I was like, look at your business though. No offense to them. You have no opening time. You have no closing time. You have no website, so no one could even know that where they contact you. I come to your business, right? You have no phone number on the front. So even when you're closed, I can't even call you. Your customer service is not good. You might be a food place, as example, right? You have no set menus of even like days sometimes, what days or what food being served. We have to come there and check maybe. I'm not talking about one particular business. We're just talking about different things from different businesses, right? And it's like these businesses could have stayed open if they were just running better business. Not all of them. Some of them would have still failed. But my thing is, if you do everything, as I always say, you could, and you fail, then it's not really a failure. The business failed, but you didn't fail because there's nothing more you could have done.
Yeah, perfect, man. That's perfect. And last question before we go into some quickfire questions: what do you want your legacy to be?
I think that I want my legacy more so to be, I guess, just lived through my lineage in a sense. I guess, loads of us want our name to continue. And if I'm being very honest, I don't care that much about my name continuing, because I can't, I guess I can't live through my name. I'm not living. So whatever the case is, whether my name continues or not, I'm not there to see it or feel it, so ultimately I want my children to take on the ethics and the, that I've taught them. And I want them to continue it and further it, and kind of like pass that on through their children. And I think, honestly, as well, I think that, like I say this to my children, because I'm a Christian, I want my children to grow up that way, and I want them to grow to have their own relationship with God. And that's kind of what I want. I'm not trying to have them be a connection to God for them. I genuinely want them to have literally their own walk that has nothing to do with me, their own relationship, and kind of like those ethics. Because a lot of these things, like which I do in business, this is where it comes from. It comes from my beliefs it comes from my relationship with God. So I want them to have that same thing and for them to pass that on as well. So as much as I want people to thrive and I want them to live better and I want them to, eat well and I want them to, to help other people, I kind of like the backbone of where that comes from in my life is my faith. So I want that to continue.
Perfect. All right. That's great. Thanks a lot, Mark. All right. So let's go into the quickfire questions. Yeah. It's 10 quick questions, 20 seconds max to answer. But just whatever first comes to your head.
All right.
And just shout that out.
Okay.
All right. First question. What's your favorite movie?
Batman Begins.
Cool. Second one.
Something that came to my head.
What's your favorite book?
Shaping Up Culture.
Of course. Third one. Name a song that you can never get bored of.
Let It Burn and Burn Usher.
Cool. Fourth. If you could only eat one food for the rest of your life, what would you pick?
Jollof rice.
Standard.
But you got to give me some stew with that.
Yeah.
I come on, and some protein. Let me run some chicken with that as well.
Cool. All right. Next one. How do you start your day?
I wake up and creep out my room so I don't wake up my wife. Brush my teeth, sneak around the house, and then I walk into my children's bedroom and make sure that they're okay and that they are they're warm and all that kind of stuff. They're then coming to work. And I know it's gone past 20 seconds. And as you heard when we started, just before we started the interview, I come into the barber shop and I do a morning intro where I'm shouting basically morning Insta. And that's kind of how I start my day. Because you were like, I switched on the thing and you were like, who was talking in the background? You heard some shouting in the background.
Yeah.
I didn't realize you had come on yet. So yeah, I do this morning ritual in the barber where I'm kind of like morning Insta. I'm back in the barber shop, because I have the thing where I say, start your day the way you need to go on. So force yourself to be happy, think about happy things, start with energy and try and continue in that same trajectory.
Sick. All right, next one. Name 3 people that inspire you.
3 people that inspire me. My mum, her work ethic from growing up, just her hustle, inspired me subconsciously as well. It wasn't even consciously. I just realized as I got older that, all of that hustle, I take from that. 2 other people that inspire me. Wow, that is. I don't know why I've gone blank.
Well, we can leave it with just your mum.
People that inspire me. Huh?
So we can leave it with just your mum.
People that inspire me. I think I'm just going blank for some strange reason because I'm trying to think about even the business. Like, to be fair, there's some people that inspire me, right? And at different times in my life when they inspire me. So I don't want to leave it like it's just these 3 people. It's different moments. So even like there's one person that's inspiring me right now. I don't even know her name, but I've been following some of her YouTube things and I don't even know her name, but I follow her stuff and she's inspiring because I just like the way she's running her business. So I listen to her vlogs that she does like weekly, and I can't remember her name. I'm subscribed to her channel, but it's just because I saw some stuff she was doing before I watched, I just subscribed. Then every now and then, like from YouTube, I get this thing that pops up. I think her name Millie something, right? So at this moment, she's inspiring me. But then previously, there'll be different people as well at different times. Like in different areas. My wife inspires me. Like my wife inspires me because of her brains. She speaks like 4 or 5 different languages. She's educational wise, she's just smart. She's an artist. She's very creative. The way she sees things. So she's come into inspiration for me as well. So yeah, it's just different people. At different times. For different reasons as to why they inspire me.
Cool, that's all good. Next
There'll be
one.
barbers who inspire me. There'll be barbers who inspire me when I just look at your haircuts. I'm like, oh, that really inspires me. What you're doing really inspires me as well. So it's hard just to say 3. So I have to have sections.
Yeah, cool, all good. All right, what's the best advice you've ever received?
I'm going to say I'm going to change the question to one of the best pieces of advice I ever received was someone saying, just get it done.
Perfect. All right.
Literally, I was doing something. And this person, although I was like, you know what, this person doesn't get the situation which I'm in, but he'll just like, listen, I'll just get it done. I don't think he even knows, but he'll just like, just get it done. And I was like, you know what? you're right. Just get it done. Because ultimately, it doesn't matter what you're going through. You're trying to achieve something. You just get it done. Like success. I said this to someone yesterday. Success doesn't care about your excuses. Like it literally does not care. Your excuses can be great for you, right? But success, and what I mean by success is the goal of where you're going to, does not care as to why you didn't hit here or why you didn't reach here. So it's almost like just get it done. Yes, you might be in a worse situation than someone else. Cool. But if you're both going for the same thing, it doesn't matter where you're coming from. It doesn't matter that person's 5 steps ahead of you. Success / your goals don't care. So just get it done. Do what you need to do to get it done.
Perfect. All right. If you were to dedicate the rest of your life to one charitable cause, what would you pick?
One child support course, did you say?
One charitable cause.
Oh, charitable.
Yeah.
Oh, charitable course. I would say this is going to be a cop out. You're going to say, not a cop out, but I would say the church. And the reason why I say the church is because it spreads it out wider. Because if you dedicate it, and I'm not talking about every single church. Like I'm not going to act like every single church is doing stuff or helping out. But there are plenty of good churches out there which are actually helping out things in their community. Whether it's it could be homelessness, could be poor people, it could be abuse and all these things there, right? So if I could dedicate to that, then that opens it up to a bunch of different branches that a bunch of people get helped, instead of just saying I donate money to charity and stuff like that, which has nothing to do with the church, right? Just to make it clear. But that in a way would be, I could help this one cause, let's say Compassion UK, and that could just be helping poor children in this area. But if I kind of dedicate to the church instead, then those branches can help all of these different type of like people instead.
Right, perfect. All right. Last two. What's the kindest thing somebody has ever done for you?
I'll change the question. Or one, because I don't want to say something and then someone said, I did this for you and you're not remembering that. So let's say one of the kindest things someone has ever done for me would be, what comes to head is someone borrowed me money. The people who borrowed me money randomly, like if you read my book Shaping Up Culture, like you look at even like the struggles real, I've had times when people have just helped me. Like I remember one time, literally 2 situations. When I was opening up the shop, I was in a barbershop talking about needing money to raise money, and I was just talking about it, and this customer literally messaged me later and was kind of like, you know what, I'll borrow you £5,000 and pay back whenever you want, because I don't need it now. Not even talking about even the next year, because just hold it until when you can, like, because I hear what you're doing, right? That was really kind. That was really, really kind. And there's someone else, right? I was talking to him about how the same thing with the shop. I was just doing the shop. I was like, I'm making cuts to make it happen. And he just said to me, long short, he just said, here's £10,000. And he said to me, pay it back whenever you want. Like he said, you can pay it back in a few years. He goes, just make sure you do the shop right. And that was really kind.
That's perfect. And last one, what's one thing people don't know about you?
One thing, I'm quite open, to be honest. So that's hard to think. One thing people don't know about me is I don't know. I'm literally, if you came to the barbershop, I'm actually quite open. I talk about a lot of the things in my life. A lot. I'm quite open, so it's hard to think about one thing people don't know about me.
It's all good. We
I'm
can
quite
come
open.
back to that. We can always revisit that one question.
I'm quite open. Maybe yeah, I'm quite open. I'm quite vulnerable. Like
That's all good. That's it. Perfect. I know you've got to run, yeah. But do you have any closing remarks, or and where can people find you as well if they want to look for you?
Oh, if you want to look for me, just I'm online. I'm on social media. I've got a website, SliderCuts.com. Just SliderCuts. If you type in SliderCuts, you'll find me on any platform, website, Instagram, YouTube, whatever. SliderCuts, and you'll find me.
Cool. Perfect. All right. So that's that. Thanks again, Mark. Very, very much appreciate your time this morning. That was 1000 Voices. That was Mark Maciver of SliderCuts, and we're out. Okay, and that was Mark Maciver. Thank you so much for tuning in once again. It is very, very much appreciated as always. If you haven't already, please do subscribe to this on whichever platform you're listening to this on. And also let us know your thought about this interview, what your key takeaways were from the interview. Leave a comment or a review on whichever platform you're listening to this on and let us know what you thought about this and also what you think about 1000 Voices in general. Next week, as always, we're going to have another very inspirational guest on the podcast, which I cannot wait to release. Like, it's a very, very good episode. If you'd like to see some previews from this next week's episode, then follow us on our social media platforms, which is at 1000 Voices UK, and we'll be posting some clips on our social media channels. The podcast will be out on all major podcasting platforms next week, Tuesday, and the YouTube video will follow later on in the week. So subscribe so you don't miss that out. But that's that for now. Thank you so much for tuning in. This is 1000 Voices. That was Mark Maciver, and we're out.